Yeah, and sometimes that comes back to like the conversation we're having upstairs, how people will sometimes, like you said, people know what to do, and sometimes people just eat or work out as hard as they can, but then just to eat whatever they want, and that's just a bad relationship as well to get into. Like, you can end up in some bad places, because as soon as you take out the exercise, you're just eating and you've created those bad habits.
And I feel like for me, as of recent, that I'm trying to like get more fit, is like, what a privilege is it to be able to move your body, to be able,
100%.
So like, I guess my perception or understanding, fitness now is like, wow, movement also is connected to your soul. So I love to dance as well, so that's also another form of like exercise, but it's kind of like everything links, that it's not just let me eat right, let me move my body, but it's like, changing your attitude towards it, like, wow, like it's a blessing to be able to do this, but it's also body, mind, spirit. On
that note, Flabia, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I'm going to leave that in. That's a good intro into the episode.
Bless.
It's strange how we got connected. We were just talking about that, how we cross paths. Like, it's just the weird algorithm.
Yes.
Sent your reel in front of me.
So good.
And I was listening to it and I was like, you know what? You have to come on. We have to talk about this.
Yes.
Get you on the podcast. So again, thank you for coming on.
And thank you for having me. I feel like we're all speaking the same universal language. And somehow, it's just connecting people for the right reasons. And just even this opportunity right now feels so timely for me. Usually, like I was telling you before, I'm kind of like an off the script type of person. So I'm more of like, let's go with the flow and see where the conversation goes. So I'm like, okay, this is the right person to have that kind of conversation with. Just because I've seen how you've held space with others, and I'm like, okay, at least this will feel natural. Yeah.
100%. And that's what we're all about here at the True Form podcast.
Yes.
Just keeping it flowing.
Yes.
But I'm going to put you in the deep end straight away.
Okay.
Purpose. Purpose. I'm sort of in two minds about this, and I want your opinion on it. Do you think purpose, people are struggling to find purpose at the moment, or is it just people are becoming more aware of it, and it's more, I guess, across social media, people are talking about it more? So do you think it's just people are talking about it more, or people are struggling more with finding purpose?
From my personal perspective, to find your why, to find your reasons, your purpose to things, it requires you silencing the noise. You kind of have to go through a very introspective journey, because, there's a lot of things that, people would think like, okay, if I'm an athlete, that's my purpose. If I'm a musician and da-da-da-da, like that's what we do. But how are you using that gift? That is what the purpose is. So I think that people sometimes, because of the noise, it's hard for them to listen to themselves, to understand why they want to do certain things, to understand what feels right for them. And that requires grounding yourself in a way that gives you purpose, so I think I acknowledge that there's a lot of conversations around that, but I also feel like there's a need for a lot of offline time with self, journaling, and it's a journey in itself, because you might feel in one season that I'm being called to do X, and then in another season it feels like Y, and another one it's 1, 2, 3. So it also shifts and changes as you go. So I think people need to embrace it as a journey, but always be grounded to your whys, because even if the language like purpose sometimes feels heavy, it's like, what's my purpose in life, and it's a bit loaded, that I can understand why some people might not run away, but like kind of like, okay, let me pack that for later. Let me live in the now, and then I'll find my purpose later. Or it's just like, it feels very serious. And this is a very unserious generation in time, so Yeah.
Yeah, when you go and you, like talking to the younger generation, you've got to find your purpose, and they're like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to TikTok and live my life, you
Yeah.
know? So I can understand how that conversation requires a level of self-reflection and truth searching that takes time, energy, and like you need to be in the right mind, the right place to really explore that. And that essentially is what it is. It's you're exploring, you know, you're defining things as you go. It's not like something that is set in stone. Well, that's how I see it. You know, the more that I get to know myself, the more that I get to experience certain things in life, the more that I feel like I am, you know, finding my purpose, or I'm creating my purpose. I'm narrating my story as I go.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there. Purpose does seem to be loaded and maybe complicated, like overcomplicated as well. But like you said, you just need to get offline and do the simple things. Well, I think they're simple. Journaling, walking, not having something in your ears the whole time, whether it's music or podcasts or anything like that.
Yeah.
Being with yourself for a bit. So what is not, like you said, you know, people get a bit too much noise. What's noise?
I feel like noise could be many things. Sometimes noise is your ego. Sometimes noise is the opinion of others. Sometimes noise is the expectations, you know, whether it's what you expect yourself to be or what others put on you and so forth. And it's like being overly exposed to many things, like just, I guess, life, you know, in a nutshell, can be quite noisy. Anything that removes you from yourself, I would say, is noise that you need to silence. Everything has a function, everything has a purpose. You know, we do need to listen and coexist with people. And people also are mirrors to us. So sometimes listening to people can help you define your purpose. But sometimes if you don't have a strong sense of self, or you're not discerning enough, then that's how it can become a noise. You know, it can cloud your judgment, or it can confuse you further. So I guess that's why it's important to firstly have those offline moments. You know, that way people are either affirming something that you already know and feel about yourself, or you're able to just separate that as like, okay, that is a projection, or that is, so you're able to identify things for what they are, and not allow it to kind of like consume you and then take that, you know, effect. Yeah
100% agree. So it's sort of like you got to quieten everything so you can actually think and then find yourself. So let's break that down a little bit. How would you recommend people quiet the noise and start to find themselves, or be able to listen to themselves?
Well, for myself, what grounds me is my faith, number one. And although I am Christian by faith, I think the same philosophy applies with whatever faith or you resonate with, because it's the same principles.
And what's that?
You know, believing in something greater than yourself, you know, whether it's Buddha, whether it's, you know, higher consciousness, or whatever the terms is. It's different languages, but it's the same thing. So for myself, I firstly need to get outside of like myself and I pray a lot. You know, some people may meditate, whatever form of exercises, but for myself, I pray, I center myself in the Word, so I read the Bible. I try to, you know, apply it in my life as well, and I journal on it, because it's one thing to read it as just a word. It's another thing to let it marinate and really let us sit. You know, I feel like the world is such a fast-paced environment that we don't really sit with things long enough. So in my offline moments, and as I was speaking before, going through that spiritual cleansing period, I would read the Word, sit with it, journal, about it, and it's just a time for me to just show up in truth as whatever I am in the moment, you know. Sometimes you're full of joy, sometimes you're full of anger, sometimes you're full of frustration, you know. And I think sometimes there's a time and place for everything, but I feel like in solitude you're safe to express all that you are, you know. So it's also moments where I can just release whatever's in my heart or whatever's in my mind at that time, and in that I'm able to take it from here and vocalize it or journal it down, and then you start realizing that, whoa, all this heaviness that I've been feeling, because your body communicates to you. All of a sudden you have body aches, or like you have a headache, or you know, whatever it is, like you just feel unsettled and you're not sure why. But when you're reflecting and you're, you know, meditating or you're praying and you're releasing these things, you start realizing that, okay, there was a lot happening in the background. The noise was there. But yeah.
Love that. I've been doing something similar, probably without actually realising, but when emotions come up, say anger, happiness, love, whatever, just writing it down and then trying to journal, see how it feels, spending time in that emotion, writing about that emotion, all that sort of stuff. It does make a big difference, especially when it comes to, you know, emotions that are counterproductive, I guess, like anger or jealousy, those sort of things. So you can sort of figure out why you're angry or why you're jealous, and it definitely does. I feel that as well, like it releases like some sort of tension within your body, because then you realise like, it doesn't matter. I had a guest on a few weeks ago, it was quite a few weeks ago now, who is a comedian, and she actually uses like life situations that anger her or upset her and put them into jokes and use it as material.
Yep.
And we actually went through that process of writing a joke about something that annoys me and making fun of it. Maybe not fun of it, but putting it in a humorous way.
Right.
And it just completely changes your attitude towards that whole situation. So anybody listening that wants to start, I'd strongly recommend that. So if there's something out there that annoys you or upsets you, just think about, or maybe go back and listen to that episode. But yeah, just think about it in a different way. Like, you know, why does it annoy you? And yeah, it's a fun process to do.
I love that. I believe that you need to channel things. So whether it's like a comic relief, whether it's, you know, art, poetry, music, whatever, like, you know, just find a channel to release what is. But that's interesting. I might take that on board.
Yeah. I'll eventually get how to do it on paper. I'm sure there's videos and books on how to actually write jokes and do it, but I'll try and make it a short one so people can just maybe like use it as a journal prompt.
Yes.
I think that'd be quite handy, because again, we were sort of chatting about this beforehand, like sometimes there's so much anger and frustration within communities, but there doesn't have to be. Like, we're all speaking the same language, but just in a different way. And sometimes that different way just gets miscommunicated, and then that miscommunication ends up being anger or something like that. And all you need to do is just step back and go, yeah, we're all talking about the same thing, and laugh about it.
Yeah, I hear it. I also feel like the thing is we can't avoid misunderstandings. The truth is, like, as humans, you know, we're bound to be misunderstood, and we're also bound to misunderstand others. But I feel like on the opposite script of things, it's like, how do you deal with things, you know? So, yeah, so it's the conflict resolution is what we need to work on as people more. And I like the idea of taking things lightly. It's something that I'm not used to, because I take things personally. You know, I take things personally, but I'm working on that. Jesus is still working on me, you know. But now, just in like, actually, I'll bring this up. So there is someone who reached out to me, and he was helping me with something, right? And I was unresponsive to the message for a period of time, just because I was going through my own motions of things. And he sent me a very passive aggressive message. And I would have left it as that, like, well, you know, you're tripping, that type of situation. But I thought, okay, like, you know, how crazy is it that sometimes I might be tripping over something that I don't understand, you know, like what's going on with people. So in that moment, I kind of had to look at things very objectively and be like, okay, I see where the misunderstanding is, because nobody knows what's happening with you, you know. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of like, okay, address this in a way where he can see where I'm coming from and I can see where he's coming from. Long story short, I just told him what the situation was. He was very apologetic. He took accountability. He's like, I'm really sorry, da 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 da. But I even used that moment to be like, you know what, you taught me something, because sometimes I'm that person, you know, and I take offense. So just in line with what we're speaking about here, whether it's like, you know, on an individual base or community or worldview conflict, because it's all the same thing, you know. You're just so consumed in your own world that there's a lot of like offenses that are being taken, you know. But if we're able to sit and talk about things, and I'm able to share my perspective with you, even if you don't necessarily you hold truth to your experience, that yes, you know, it was rude of me to ignore the message, but I wasn't ignoring, but like that is a fact that yes, I was unresponsive. The facts are there when things are happening. So the misunderstanding could be that yes, you know, you offended me, you said something about this and XYZ. But if we're able to just, you know, talk through things and see it from the other person's point of view, I feel like the world will be a better place.
And I think that does come down to quietening the noise, spending time with yourself and journaling and, you know, having some quiet times, because you become less responsive, like less reactive is the word I'm going for. So, all right, so let's bring it back.
Yep.
We've gone through how to quieten the noise.
Yep. Through
that whole bit there. Once you've quieted the noise, what do you feel like the next step would be for somebody?
And is this in their pursuit to...
Well, in the reel that I've seen you talking about on LinkedIn, you're talking about anchors and helping people find their anchor points. So can you talk more on that? Because I feel like you need to quiet the noise to then anchor something.
Yes. I still feel like, okay, to anchor yourself, I'll use my own personal experience. When the noise is around, you would think, okay, if I find this working opportunity, I'll find my purpose, I'll feel fulfilled. If I get into this relationship, this will fulfill me. There's a lot of like things that you're attaching yourself to, but they're not deeply grounding yourself. You know, they're not anchoring you to something greater than yourself. So after you've silenced the noise and you've realized really nothing really matters, nothing is that deep, you know, it anchors you back to self, you know, back to, because my faith, back to God, back to something greater than me. And then I start leaning on that, like, you know, what, you know, let me live this life, you know, in a way that is beyond what I think I want for myself, you know, beyond me serving myself. Like, you know, if I see myself doing X, Y, Z, just like, you know, self-gratification type of things, you know. So the next step would be, I guess, really sitting with yourself and finding your whys, you know, whatever career path that you want to get into. Like, if you want to be the best makeup artist, what is that? Matter of fact, I think we need to give more of these creative outlets more credit, because they create such safe spaces, even barbershops. Sorry, I'm so random sometimes, but it's like, you know, my friend runs a barbershop and he talks about how that creates an experience for men. You know, that's beyond just doing. That's a purpose behind it, because he knows that this is a downtime for people and things like that. So I think that's the thing. You can find purpose in what you do, but it would need to have more meaning to be sustainable, to sustain you for the long run. Otherwise, you'll just be jumping from one thing to another, just doing.
I see. So you want to try and find the why you're doing it rather than just doing it because it feels good or what you think other, I guess, external factors, like, I guess, working in a barbershop because somebody else said it would be a good opportunity. So you hold them in high regard. So you try and do it because they said you should do it rather than because you want to do it.
Exactly. And feelings are fleeting. If I jumped on every opportunity just because I felt like it, I can jump right back out when I don't feel that way anymore. So I feel like you need to ground yourself more than what feels like, what you feel like in the moment. That's another thing. How you feel about that thing is not a why, and that's another thing, like by silencing the noise, it's all a part of that journey. Because how about if I no longer feel led to empower people? How about if now that becomes taxing? But if I feel like it's within my purpose, if I feel like it's within my calling, then I would have to, I would know that I have to get over that feeling, and understand that it's just a fleeting emotion, but my reason, my why behind that is so much greater than, that temporary haze or phase.
So how would somebody find their why? Any recommendations? I know, within personal training, I usually try and get people to ask themselves why 5 times. Why do you want that? And then why do you want, keep going why? And about the 5th one, you actually get to the truth.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything like that you've practiced or?
To be honest, in my own self-development journey, there's a lot of gurus that I've listened to. I can't even tell you the amount of searching that I've done, but in truth, just experiencing, going through the journey. I think you already having that feeling or desire to search for your why will lead you to the right place, and if you're looking at it as it's a journey, then you won't necessarily just take a few steps and stop there, and you're looking at it from the grand scheme of things, that there's emotion to things. And I was saying before, that it's not fixed. It's not a fixed journey. It's not just a one destination. Maybe some things will lead you to that. Maybe I need to come to True Form podcast, rediscover my why, and then leave and feel like, ooh, maybe I want to go through that direction now, because this now adds meaning to my journey. So I think that as good as it is to do these exercises, follow whoever, get insights from people, because that's how we learn. We learn through our environment, we learn through people, either through their success, through their mistakes and so forth. It shapes us, but I think just leave room for growth, leave room for discovery, leave room for going through the motion of things, but always come back to yourself, always have those offline conversations with yourself, because maybe in one season it was, yes, I want to pursue modeling, and now I'm in the modeling industry for 2 years, and I'm feeling like, this is not really for me. But the feeling is not just I feel angry or I feel mad, da-da-da-da. It starts feeling like it's run its course, because sometimes that's how it feels like with the purpose of things. It feels like, okay, it's coming to an end of a season, and then you just allow that to transition out, but come back to your why. Okay, what am I feeling led now to do? Yeah, I find that maybe it is all the gurus and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes they're like, you got to find that why, and that is hard set, and that's it. You can't vary. And it's like, well, why can't it change over time? It's a journey. Life is a journey. And even with purpose, why can't, you might find purpose in modelling, but then you may have found that purpose and go, well, yeah, that's what I did it for. What's the next purpose? There's no reason why it can't change and flow and
stop at one point, find that, and then go to the next one.
Exactly, because how about if that modeling opportunity put you in rooms where you met XYZ person and that was the purpose for that, and then now it opened a new opportunity for you and the direction changed. I think that's the thing. There has to be a fine balance between life, type A, type P personalities type of thing. Some people need structure and it's important for them to, write down the why, like we're heading here and boom, that's what we're going to do. Some people would, choose the other option of like, let's just go through that discovery. I think you need both. I think a sense of direction is important. You need to know where you're heading, but don't be fixed on the end of the destination. Enjoy the steps in between, because that's where you really learn, that's where you really grow. But if you're just fixed on X, then you're not allowing yourself to gain these small nuggets, and that is probably the whys as you go, not just the end.
I think that's a talent in itself, though, trying to get to that destination, but also finding those nuggets along the way. A lot of people might just have their blinders on and like, I just want to get to that destination and that's it. Like, I'm there. I think if you can develop that skill of opening up and finding those opportunities of meeting people and like realizing that is an opportunity to go down, not just, that person's annoying me by talking to me. I think that's a skill in itself. So what would you say your why or your purpose is at the moment then?
I think that Flabia, I always speak in third person, has done the inner work, where I have tested the waters with different, gigs, different things. I have landed in sharing my gifts with the world. I think for a long time I've kind of like dimmed my light. I've, tried to just get by, but now I'm realizing that this is not for me alone. There's so much value that you can give, when you have a lot to share. Like, my lived experiences are rich. I'm also someone that deeply wants to connect with people. I feel like I have a way of understanding people's needs, and just giving them space to see the God within them, like I was saying before. And that's what it's about. That's how you empower others. It's not necessarily, it's Flabia. I don't want to be your inner voice. I want you to trust in your own voice, in your own abilities. And I think now I am at a place where I want to launch things, head on. But yes, not to contradict myself, but going back to the point of, I understand that it's a journey, So in this season, it looks like focusing on my business, Transcend Beyond the Scope. It looks like defining what that is and the direction that I want to take with that. But I'm also open to the fact that I understand that it will shape as it goes, and that I'm not trying to box or put a fixed image or a fixed destination to it. I know my life, where I feel the most like myself is when I'm flowing, when I just allow things to just be. So yes, that's where I am currently.
What was the business name?
Transcend Beyond the Scope.
And what is the goal for that in the future?
Global. I want to not only help individual business organizations, but God willing, contribute in a meaningful way, to help people see, like, back to the God in them, whether it's operational side of things where, there's a problem with, employees not feeling fulfilled, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, whether it's a gap in within council or government reforms and things like that, whether it's one-on-one counseling, coaching, mindset, helping, wherever I can best contribute. So Transcend Beyond the Scope, the name in itself is to, transcend beyond the scope, beyond the fixed way of doing things, So I think that is essentially my purpose. Look at that. True form. Yeah.
From what I heard, it's like want to transcend beyond the scope. You don't want to focus on the destination. You want to put the feelers out and focus on everything on the way to that destination.
Yes. And
Love
I just came to that realization here. So thank you.
Anytime. So what have you done in the past to lead you to this point then? So obviously that is a strong message. And I absolutely love that. And I 100% think that you are going to do that, like, without a doubt. But what has led you to this point to want to do that?
So professionally, I've done different types of jobs in the past, you know, whether it's local to gov, working within different sectors, and then also just being really connected to my community and serving within my community. So I'm South Sudanese by background, and yeah, contributing to, you know, the youth engagement side of things, helping South Sudanese mothers and contributing to the development or engagement of the community. But I think my journey is best on those offline moments, going back to silencing the noise. When you're good at many things, or when you have the desire to do many things, you know, you can also, you know, get lost in the source, you know. So for me, I've had to get back to my why and simplify it. Like, just instead of having 100 tabs open, I'm like, okay, girl, focus on one thing first. You know, what's the most important thing? You know I can engage with people on a, you know, local level, and I can also hold space in certain rooms, you know. So I want to use that to my best ability to actually make a meaningful change. So where I can, in those spaces that, you know, people that look like me may not be able to get to, is where I want to contribute to, you know. But then that also requires you being connected to the people. Otherwise, how are you advocating for the needs of, you know, community members if you're, you know, removed, you know? So, yeah.
Let's talk about your community. I'm going to be doing some travel later on in the year to experience different communities around the world to see what they do differently and what, you know, the good parts are that we can use, I guess, here in Australia that, you know, like, I guess, help people find their purpose, live a healthier, happier life, all that sort of stuff. Looking at your community, what are some attributes, I guess, you could, or things that you would do differently that can help people live a long, healthy, happy life as a whole?
I think, to keep it simple, everyone should know this phrase, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. You know, I think, so for myself, I spent from 2021 to 2023 overseas in South Sudan.
Oh, yeah.
This was the first time since the age of 3 that I went back to the motherland. And that is when I saw how people live, and how, you know, well, very community orientated, like very village like, you know, unit mentality.
Here in Australia, I find coming from the country and then moving to the city, I've experienced a whole different, wide range of different cultures. And a lot of the time those cultures almost struggle here because as Australians, we're almost too individual. We haven't got the community or that village mentality here in Australia, and I would like to see that here a lot more because I think that's what could be the missing key. And one thing I do worry about is, I guess, like South Sudanese population moving here and then almost adopting that. I think that could be quite damaging to what we call Australia.
I hear it.
Yeah.
In my experience, I think that's the thing. That's pretty much the migrant experience. You know, you want to adapt to the environment that you're at. And there's so much that we've learned in migrating here with the Australian way of life and the Western way of life. But now we're at a place where we've seen, okay, we didn't place too much value on community. but then, you know, the kids became disengaged. You know, how we traditionally solve problems, like, for example, if you're having marital or family problems, you know, we get elders to come in and counsel, and, like, you know, there's that kind of sense of openness, you know, but it's also people that you trust. So all of these things keep us connected. And what I've seen within my personal community, so within South Sudanese, there's 64 tribes, right? And I come from this eastern part of the country, the Lotuko tribe, but we also have not a subclan, but the overarching regional area is Equatoria. So at the moment, our community is reconnecting in a very meaningful way, because we went through a season of years where people were disengaged. There was a lot of, like, you know, multiple reasons why people weren't as connected.
You're talking about in
Australia, Melbourne, Australia.
Yep.
And then now, because we've seen that there's a need to be connected, you know, there's a need for kids, young people, to know their roots, you know, to understand the philosophies that have kept us alive, going back to your point, for so long, you know, respecting elders, you know, the certain principles, like, you know, that keep us grounded, you know. And I've seen a massive shift. And going back to your point, you know, without that, that's where we become, you know, lost and confused. So back to my journey to the motherland, I saw how people were living there. You know, your neighbor is literally, like, they don't have to come from the same tribe as you, but you're connected. They can take care of your child. You know, you can trust that, like, if you're doing anything in the streets and someone wants to discipline you, they would, you know. So here they might see that as noisy or you're overstepping, but I also see the value in that, because then you're not accountable to just yourself. You recognize that it's, you know, you're all moving parts to community, you know. And I think that philosophy or that way of life kind of holds us all accountable. You know, so let's put it into perspective here in Australia. Let's say if I strongly felt tied to the city of Melbourne, right? And I saw that as my community, you know, I will not be littering all over the place, because I'm like, that's my community, that's my home, that's my village, for example. You know, I would be mindful of how I move around the CBD, because I'm like, okay, this is my community, this is my village. You know, I would not want to be disrespecting people and so forth. So there's a way of, like, sense of respect that you have when you have that community mindset towards things, that I feel like is, if not missing, it's more underdeveloped. I would say underdeveloped here. You know, yeah.
When I say the word village, what do you think of?
To me, village can either be my family. That's my village. It can be my, you know, support network, which is like my friends. Like, think of the circle type of thing. There's so many levels to village, but, you know, at the grand scheme of things, village is like worldwide. You know, we're all a part of one village. You know, the human race is the village. And of course, like, we can divide ourselves to the core, where I am my village at the end. And the same principle where it's respect, you know, integrity, trust, honesty, all of these things, you know, that, you know, shape, or it should be the foundation of a village. Yeah.
So let's say, you know, that village mentality, we'll call that what we were just talking about. Obviously things are changing. Like, how our parents were raised are completely different to, you know, how the teenagers coming through now are going to raise their kids, because things are just different. Things change. Right. So how would we almost instill that village mentality into the younger generations?
I would say it starts early on in, like, kindergarten. You know, teachers, oh my goodness, they play such a major role. You know, I feel like everyone can almost recount, you know, a teacher that has made, you know, a good impact, or, like, you know, derail them from pursuing their dreams and so forth, you know. So I feel like from, you know, those fundamental years, 5 and above, you know, how they see themselves, how they play with other kids, you know, how they connect, especially in Australia. Australia is very multicultural. You're going to be exposed to different cultures nonetheless, you know, unless you're living in a different part where there's not that much multiculturalism. But if that's even the case, you know, let's watch something, you know, let's, you know, educate people still on the fact that, okay, these are the people that, you know, live here with us and blah, 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 blah. So I would say installing those values early on in life, even within homes, because it doesn't just stop at schools. You know, it's how parents speak to their children. You know, how do we, you know, when you're going to the local shops, for example, and you're seeing, you know, people from all different nationalities working there or even just doing their own shoppings, how do you interact with people? You know, because that is people also a part of your village, a part of your local area. So I would say yes, early on in life, in home, and also in these places where people are, or young kids are getting educated, or where they receive their information, and they're exposed to different things. And I would even say being intentional with the kind of things that you expose them to from a young age, because obviously that's how they're receiving the information, you know. So being intentional with, like, you know, the type of films that they watch or what you're exposing to them, like what message do you want them to understand about the village that they have to live through. But yes, there's always like exercises or, you know, modules or other things like that we can always keep learning through each other, or even having these conversations, you know. Find someone that doesn't look like you, doesn't speak your language, you know, whether it's, you know, wherever, you know, be open, be curious, have a conversation. That's how you strengthen the village.
100% agree. Conversations. I don't think, again, I think maybe it's that outside the village mentality. People just don't have conversations anymore. They might have conversations, but they don't listen. I think listening is almost a dying skill, unfortunately, because again, like, I think when stories are getting told from, you know, older generations to younger generations, listening and understanding those stories that's when it's going to have an impact, because the story behind it, on why whatever the story is, that's what's going to change your mind, or, you know, instill those values and thoughts and the reason whys and purpose in the stories. But listening, really listening and understanding what people are talking about, unfortunately, I think that's a dying skill that people need to, I guess, move away from all the noise to bring it back to the start.
Ooh, that's a title. That is a title.
Reducing the noise.
Yeah, I agree. But I would even say, yes, the younger generation, they're moving through a different time. There's a lot of things that's happened, you know, to the world around them. But it's like, okay, the same way of writing the story or narrating the story might not be working, but how else can we connect, you know, how, True. You know, so I think Very it's true. Like finding new ways to connect with each other. You know, right now, most of us have a very short attention span. TikTok culture, life, you know, is very fast, you know, so it's kind of like we have to move with the times. So yes, people aren't listening that well. Yes, people are listening to respond, not to understand. That is true. You know, there are things that can be done to help with that, but I think it's like also people on an individual base recognizing that, oh, okay, yes, perhaps I'm not actually taking this in, and being self-aware enough and being curious enough to be like, okay, let me pause. Maybe I'm jumping the gun too much. Maybe my mind's working in a way where, yes, I want to make my point fast. Otherwise, I'm going to lose it, which most people, you know, I like that, where if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget what I have, you know, had to say.
So we've spoken a lot about purpose, reducing the noise, community, that village mentality. Like I was saying before, you seem to have a good grasp on your self-awareness, self-understanding, understanding of others and all that sort of stuff. So if you could give us 5 things, 5-ish, we'll go for 5, that you think has helped you be that way, what would those 5 things be?
Firstly, I don't run away from the bad feelings.
Okay.
You know, I don't run away from the bad feelings. I think coming into full acceptance of who I am, you know,
accepting who you are is very hard sometimes. So how have you become able to accept yourself?
I think it's a mindset thing, because truly taking things lightly, going back to that comic relief, you know, nothing is that serious. It's the kind of energy that you put onto that. So if I've made a mistake, which I've made many mistakes, but it's kind of looking at it from the lens of, how about if all these mistakes was meant to bring me to this point? You know, how about, you know, trial and error, I've had to learn things the hard way. But then in the same way, I need to place energy on all the right things that I've done also. So I think that nobody can shame you if you take full ownership of your story. You know, no one can bring you down on things that you embrace, you know. And if you look at it from the perspective of, okay, these things, you know, help me find my why. These things, you know, was a way of me exploring to come to this point. You know, whether I firstly thought I wanted to be a saleswoman or whatever, and, you know, I made a couple of bad sales, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not that good at selling things, you know, and just like those trial and errors. But I think I have started to take things lightly, you know, moving from that fixed on the destination has helped me. So I would say, number 1, don't be fixed on a destination. Leave room for growth, leave room for exploring. Have a lot of offline moments, journal, you know.
That'll be 2.
Meditate, pray, whatever, you know.
When you say meditate or pray, are they the same thing? Like, I'm not religious myself, so I'm not really sure what praying is. So can you talk about that and how it differs from meditation?
Sure. For me, well, prayer from a Christian perspective is a conversation between you and God, right?
Like a literal, like you're talking to God?
I would see it that way. When I pray, I feel like I'm having a conversation with God. And that's where I'm able to be my full honest self, the most unfiltered. And maybe that's where a lot of the offloading is, because sometimes, let's say you're speaking to a counselor or you're speaking to any person, you might filter things a little bit. So speaking to God, which I know is, you know, has unlimited capacity to hold, you know, all that I am. And also I see it as he is my source, he's my energy plug. You know, when I feel empty, when I feel like I'm running low, you know, the word of God, like the Bible, helps me also to re-energize, reboost, because there's just certain things in this world that drains you, you know. So for me, prayer is a way of me recharging. It's a way of me releasing. It's a way of me grounding. And then reading the word, because it's, for me, I've realized the importance of knowing who God is. And I've only come to understand who God is by reading the Bible. I remember, you know, at the start of my, you know, journey, I found people that were trying to like shove faith down my throat, like, calm down. You know, I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand how powerful it is as a tool to grounding self, but to also understand the God that I'm serving, you know. So I think the more that I started reading scripture and knowing, you know, what are the fruits of the Spirit, you know, things like that, you know, whether it's goodness, self-control, all of these things, then I started to understand, okay, when I'm moving away from that, that's when I'm out of alignment. So to me, it's a way of like knowing that language, and then that helps me understand myself also throughout the journey. In terms of meditation and other forms of self-help or, faith that people have, I can't speak too much on that, but I'm pretty much sharing it as if this is not,
I'd say it's very similar, but just a different way of going about it. I'm not saying, like, again, God could mean different things to everybody. So when I say God, it could be higher self, whatever, insert whatever you feel like is necessary there. But when you're talking to God, if you were to meditate, it's almost better to talk to God, because a lot of people get into meditation thinking they need to quiet their mind straight away. And if I'm not quiet, like if my mind's not quiet, I've failed. But it's almost good to just have that internal dialogue. And if you're talking to somebody, whoever that may be, and that helps you calm your mind and get you into a place of, a quieter mind, then does it matter like what you call that? Like, so I think it's a good way of going about into a meditation, because again, like I said, a lot of people start meditation, think about all these thoughts, have all these thoughts in their minds, probably have a lot of internal dialogue and go, oh, but that didn't work, so I'm not going to do that again. So it might actually be a better way of looking at meditation.
And going back to your point of like, how you said you're going to go to different parts of the world and see how long people have been living. I feel like that philosophy in itself keeps people alive longer, So whatever line of faith or whatever principle, whether it's like, yes, God or this or that is what keeps people grounded longer. So I feel like it's a need, it's a must to have something that anchors you, that is bigger than yourself. Personally, so that's number 4 or 5 now?
That was 3. We need 2 more. Doesn't have to, so even try and think about things that you do. It's hard because I do this all the time, but things that you find easy that I guess other people struggle with.
I spend a lot of time alone, and I love that. I've learned to be a friend to myself. I've learned to trust my feelings, my intuition, trust what I believe, So to me, that is what's made me unshakable. It's made me stronger, because I know that when I think something or when I feel something, it's not just like, oh, I feel and I think. Like, there is a sense of like knowing that flows, because I've spent so much time offline and I've done the groundwork. I've gone through, like in psychology, they say shadow work and all of these things, which is why I think I can confidently speak about my experiences, which, this can be another conversation another time. But so I think that would be the 4th, how well do you know yourself? So spending time to really be a friend to yourself, because that's how you're able to be a better person, sister, brother, partner, employee or boss,
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. All right, 5th one, I'm going to give you a prompt.
Sure.
If you had ultimate control over every citizen in Australia, everybody living within the Australian borders, and you could get them to do one thing for every day, they had to wake up and do that one thing, whatever it is, morning, afternoon, lunch, whatever. Every single person has to do it. What would that one thing be?
Speak life. I would say speak life, because speak life, that's a Christian term for like just, spreading kindness,
How would people, again, they can only do it one way. How would they speak that kindness?
Sharing a compliment. I feel like you can compliment your kids, you can compliment yourself in the mirror, you can compliment, your local supermarket service person, you can compliment the plants, just gratitude. Actually, gratitude would be the best word. Just being grateful, so.
Have you ever done gratitude, like writing it down, journaling gratitude?
I have. I feel like I know people generally like the gurus, when they, I don't know, sometimes for me it's about trying something but not trying it with the mindset of, okay, this is gonna unlock something straight away, you know. So I followed some prompts before, I've done the exercises, and it wasn't doing what it's supposed to do, you know. I wasn't feeling that sensation straight away. So another thing about it's a journey, and finding the language or the way that best speaks to you. So I have done it the ways that other people have done it, but I feel like when I spend time, you know, confidently speaking the way that I speak, you know, confidently affirming things or being grateful for things in a way that speaks to me directly in my lived experience, you know, in the moment, it flows a lot more better. So sometimes I write things down, sometimes I just speak, you know, and other times, you know, I'd be going for a walk and having those kind of like, you know, thinking out loud moments. And sometimes I don't even say no words, you know. Sometimes it's just like let me exhale, inhale, and just, you know, be present, you know. And then to me, that is a moment of me taking everything in, like, I'm alive and I'm well. Let me just be still in this moment. So sometimes words are not needed. There's sometimes no need for exercises and tools and all of that. Just be still.
And be grateful.
And be grateful.
Love it. Let's end it there. But before we do, where can people find you? How can they contact you? Where can they learn more about you?
Well, you can find me on Transcend with Flabia on Instagram. On LinkedIn, it's Flabia O. And these are the two platforms that I use mainly at the moment.
And what can people look forward to seeing
more
in the future?
Well, I won't tell you all my business. But you can look forward to Flabia taking up space more, sharing her truth, and making the moves necessary to contribute meaningfully.
Awesome. Flabia, thanks again. This has been awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. And I love this. I think true form is so needed. You know, it's a different way where you're able to connect with different audiences, you know, and how you complement and, you know, kind of like give space for people to just speak openly. That also speaks to you and who you are. So you wouldn't even think this is like the first interaction that we're having, but it's like, I just met this guy like 5 minutes ago. So thank you for holding that space.
Thank you. I appreciate that.